Hello, everyone. Welcome to Author Nation. Today we are talking about writing about influential figures. I'm Melody Ann. I'm your host, and I know you're here because you either have an idea for a book that you want to get out, or you have a book and you're trying to figure out how to get that book out to the world and promote it. You are in the right place. And if you're looking for resources, go to authornation.online. We have resources for you no matter what stage of the publishing process you are in. All right, today we are talking to Ed O'Devin. He is a Tokyo-based sports editor of Japan Forward and the company's related sister site, Sports Look. O'Devin is a longtime sports journalist who previously worked for the Japan Times as its chief basketball reporter from 2006 to 2020. He also covered a wide range of other sports for the newspaper, including the 2008 Beijing Olympics and the 2012 London Games, and he served as the night desk editor. A graduate of Arizona State University, O'Devin was the sports editor for the University State Press and the Arizona Daily Sun. He is the author of Going 15 Rounds with Jerry Eisenberg. Let's welcome Ed. Hi, Ed. How are you today?
I'm fine. It's 4 a.m. and I'm doing great.
Oh my gosh, 4 a.m. because you're in Japan. Thank you so much. You're a fighter. Let's use the terminology. So impressive.
I had a power nap and some coffee before we joined up.
Oh, good. Okay, so hopefully not too many jitters today. But so you're a sports journalist living in Japan. So how did you end up in Japan?
Okay, this might take a while. I'll try to be short on this part of it. Born in New York, where there's just tons of sports, right? Tons of media, and I was fascinated with both growing up. Opportunities to watch everything, listen to everything, read about everything. Living in New Jersey, Grandpa would give me the paper, and I would have all this stuff to read about. Always listening to baseball on the radio. Wanted to be a baseball play-by-play guy growing up. And moved to Arizona in high school and before my sophomore year. And I guess it kind of quickly dawned on me I want to kind of get started with a career, even in high school. I took a bus down to one of the local radio stations in the summer between my sophomore and junior years, entered the radio station, asked to speak with somebody about possibly volunteering or working in sports. And I got hooked up doing some volunteer Friday night radio reporting, calling in highlights of games. Home, like the local high school football team, Saguaro High School. They said, okay, you can be our correspondent. And we have other correspondents doing this show from the home schools. So it was basically a small notepad and getting the stats from the press crew, maybe a couple comments from the coach, and running to a local payphone and calling in like 3 or 4 minutes of highlights.
That's cool.
That was sort of my first opportunity to be a journalist without pay, but I had a little ID card. It was sort of like a mini press pass. So that was cool. Got in the games for free. And the school was really good. There was like 77-13, 75-10, like really one-sided games. So I was reporting on a lot of blowouts, which made it kind of easy, I guess. Not too much pressure to get it right when the score told you a lot. So I really enjoyed doing that my junior and senior years during the fall semester. And my high school had a monthly newspaper. So my first experience as a print journalist, was as a high school contributor for the sports and like general sections, features, and humor and opinion, and wrote throughout my high school senior year, wrote articles pretty much each month. So the deadlines weren't that stressful. We didn't have daily deadlines. Then graduated and went to Pima Community College in Tucson, and I was planning to transfer to university, but I went for 3 years and got a lot of electives and a lot of classes. even filmmaking and anthropology and a lot of interesting stuff, psychology. But I majored in mass media and then transferred the credits to ASU, Arizona State. But at Pima, I worked for the weekly paper, so it was sort of a good transition from monthly deadlines to more frequent reporting, and that was really good experience covering the entire community college sports scene. High school athletes are at a certain level. At the junior college level, a lot of them want to be professionals, or they might have not been able to get a scholarship yet, so they're trying to get better to get get the attention of the big schools. So that was really my first real crash course in recovering a lot of different things and trying to juggle school and a part-time job at a local grocery store. And it was really fun. I learned a lot working for the Aztec Press. And I actually didn't transfer until age 21 up to university, but maybe it was better. I was a little more mature, maybe, as a so-called transfer freshman or I don't know, maybe it was as a sophomore technically. I had a lot of credits and went to ASU and continued my studies in print journalism. I had to pick a specific emphasis. That was the requirement from the Cronkite School there. And I needed a minor, and I minored in cultural geography, which sort of ties into my interest into the world and travel and other countries, other cultures as well. And I worked for the state press for my entire time at the university there, covering, and we were a daily newspaper, 5 days a week, the school newspaper. So it was continuing that evolution of daily deadlines, previously weekly, previously monthly. And I think I really learned a lot by competing against the local regular newspapers, sometimes getting a scoop or sometimes getting a feature story because I'm a student. They might want to speak to a student rather than the so-called old school people, the older guys in the business, older ladies in the business. But I really learned a lot and continued my career. When I graduated, I should backstep a little bit. Sorry. I freelanced a lot in Arizona because of the climate and because of a lot of events happen there in the winter. You have the off-season auto racing in Tucson and Phoenix. There used to be a lot of magazines and radio stations that would subscribe to the service of the track. They would get the reports from the winter racing season. So my friend at the newspaper who I freelanced with in Tucson, the city paper, he said, "Hey, you can get experience doing this. You can work here and I know you're trying to get clips. You're trying to get your name out there in magazines and in the like sports publications. I'm going to recommend you for this work." And my friend Ron Summers, who went on working for USA Today and other newspapers later on, he recommended me to work at the track, the Tucson Motor Speedway. And that helped me sort of get my foot in the door as a freelance sports writer in the Southwest. So when I was at Pima, before I went to ASU, one of my classmates and photographers on the student paper there was a Japanese student from Yokohama, just around Yokohama, south of Yokohama, Sachiko. And after she left Pima, she went to work for the Rafu Shinpo, which is an LA-based English-Japanese newspaper founded in 1903 in Little Tokyo. And Sachiko did a lot of baseball photography and helping out with reporting. Right when Hideo Nomo jumped from Japan to the United States, he was the first Japanese player in MLB in more than 30 years. So when I transferred to ASU, all those spring training sites are around the Phoenix area. And the conversation with Sachiko became, let me introduce you to the sports editor of the Rafu Shinpo. Probably you can get some work helping us during spring training. And that was in 1997, my second year at ASU. And for more than a decade, or for a full decade until 2006, I contributed something on sports every year. Baseball, WNBA, basketball, gymnastics and swimming, just mostly Japanese athletes, but occasionally Japanese American athletes. So it became, it wasn't a way to get rich. It was a way to get experience and get clips and I really enjoy doing that freelance work. Um, you want to know how did I get to Japan?
Yes.
Okay, well, after college, I worked for 6 months in Birmingham, Alabama. It was a contract that was not renewable. This program, a national sort of post-college or in-college graduate internship, depending on who they selected. And you basically did everything for 6 months. You covered high schools, college, pros, whatever they wanted you to do. You did it. Interview Bo Jackson at the airport. Interview Charles Barkley. Interview the mayor. Anything sports related. So I did that. Great experience. Really helped me out later on. I had several jobs that were possibilities that didn't pan out. I was a finalist for a couple of them, but I went back to Arizona and went to the Arizona Daily Star, where I freelanced for in community college and college years. Then in 2001, I moved up to Flagstaff, north of Phoenix, close to the Grand Canyon. And I spent 5 years there on the staff, moving up from reporter to assistant sports editor to sports editor. And great experience with all the international athletes training there at high altitude, and a nice mix of high school and college work and local little leagues. The local newspapers really value that kind of community coverage.
Nice.
Okay, while I was in Flagstaff, I sort of had wanderlust. I wanted to travel and go somewhere else. And the Japan Times started advertising in 2005 for baseball coverage, and the next year for basketball coverage. I applied for both jobs, and the sports editor was interested in me for both positions, but I did not get hired to be the baseball guy. But I applied again, and I got the job in 2006, and I'm glad I took the jump.
Yeah. And so you've been there since 2006.
That's correct. July 2006, July 4th. And I started my job 2 days later. So there wasn't time to enroll in language school. It was a kind of the crash course.
Yes.
What I tell people is every Japanese person is my teacher. That's the way I look at it.
Yes, yes. I lived in Japan and I understand that start work and don't know the language yet feeling.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to figure out how the trains work.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I got lost a few times. I
Yes.
got lost.
Me too. Exactly. All right, let's jump into the book. Why did you want to write a book about Jerry Eisenberg?
Well, Jerry's career both fascinated me and inspired me. I mentioned several sports just in our introduction there. Sorry, a little long-winded, but I look at Jerry's career and I've seen all the things he's reported on: boxing, baseball, NFL, horse racing, rodeos, college basketball, wheelchair basketball. I love covering everything. One of the things you intrigued me with your questions was, what sports do you like to cover the most?
Yeah.
Well, I really love baseball and basketball, but I covered the Senior Olympics in 1997 for about 10 days in Tucson, the U.S. Senior Olympics. And I interviewed a swimmer who after World War II took the boat from the U.S. East Coast to London and trained for the Olympics on a boat, on a big ship, like dry land training. And hearing stories like that 40 years later, it was just fascinating. And the personalities of sports are really a prism of society, I think. And that really fascinates me more than the X's and O's or the statistics. And I think Jerry's a great storyteller, and he's accumulated knowledge of history and the personalities and like how civil rights played into the progress of sports, how really sports was a where civil rights were really first, the light was shown in progress, with Jackie Robinson being the first African-American player in the major leagues.
Yeah. So go ahead. Sorry.
And Jerry's former sports editor was a big advocate for Jackie Robinson. And his former sports editor was considered by many the greatest sports editor in the 20th century. And so, like, these connections, he worked with Red Smith. who many people call the greatest columnist who ever lived, or the greatest in the 20th century. So the bridges between the past and the present and the influences of Jerry's career, that also intrigued me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So he's part of a bigger story that his story tells.
Exactly.
Yeah. Beautiful. So did he know you were writing a book about him? And did he discover, did you tell him? Somehow somebody told him? Did he know?
Okay, let's rewind. Let's rewind to 2014, and I approached him for an interview for my blog site, just the WordPress blog, which a couple years later I got the official name on it. Before it was edodevinreporting.wordpress.com, but I made it a little more official a couple years ago. But I had gained some confidence, I think, as my career progressed, especially during my years at the Japan Times, where I interviewed some really prominent people, where I kind of cold called them to request an interview through their secretary, or I approached their PR firm or somebody who had a connection to them, like 1964 Olympian Bill Bradley, former senator, former basketball great, former presidential candidate. I reached out to his office to do an interview with him 50 years after the 1964 Olympics.
Hmm.
And I think I was the only reporter in Japan who tried to reach out to Bill Bradley, about his career and memories of Japan. And the interview went really well, and I wrote I think a pretty good story. It sort of boosted my confidence interviewing him and boxing great George Foreman. He gave me 2 hours on the phone. I think I sort of developed a comfort with these long interviews and long form projects. So I had been following Jerry's career throughout my whole life, basically since I was a kid. I loved his writing, and I loved the Newark Star Ledger, where he's worked for decades. And I emailed him in 2014 asking if I could interview him for my blog, maybe do a freelance piece for a magazine. And he told me he was really busy at the time, but let's keep in touch. And we finally pinned down a time a year later, and we spoke for 3 hours in the initial interview.
Wow.
And I had so much material there, and from that 3-hour interview, that I wrote a bunch of articles for my blog, which sort of became the basis for the part one of eventually I decided I want to make it into a book. Originally, I just thought, let me just try to challenge myself and do some long, detailed work. And what he said he was sort of like, he was sort of tickled by it, but I think he also was sort of sarcastic in a way, like, oh, you could have picked somebody better than me to write about, But he said, whatever you need, ask me. Whatever you want to use it. I'm happy that you're interested, and I'm happy that you want to learn about the sports journalism. So,
yeah.
But he doesn't like the word journalism. He likes the word reporters or media. Journalist, he kind of looks at it as like you're like a high and mighty financial columnist in like at some going to some event in Geneva or something.
Yeah. All right. He's a regular guy, feet on the ground kind of guy, right?
But he's old school. Yeah,
he's old school. So tell us about the book, Going 15 Rounds with Jerry Eisenberg.
Okay. I'm gonna hold it up for a second, okay?
Yeah.
Okay. On the cover of the book here is a photo from about 30 years ago of Jerry jokingly like a mock punch of Muhammad Ali. Okay.
Yeah.
And okay, the reason
love that image. So much fun.
The reason the title is Going 15 Rounds with Jerry Eisenberg is there are actually 15 chapters in part one. And for decades, boxing, the maximum number of scheduled rounds in a fight was 15. They've reduced it to 12 now, but for decades it was 15 rounds. And Jerry was one of Muhammad Ali's best friends, and also one of the sports that he had the most recognition covering. So that was his suggestion, actually, that for a book cover, that would be the ideal photo. That was his idea. And
Nice.
I didn't disagree with him. But the book, my uncle describes it as an anecdotal biography
Mm,
where Jerry wrote his own memoir, where my book is sort of picking and choosing things that are interesting to me or things that are favorite topics of his. I'm highlighting his mentors and his baseball memories, his childhood a little bit, his thoughts on not winning a Pulitzer Prize and how he had more gratitude for readers than people within the industry. Um, there are 2 chapters about Muhammad Ali in the book, and they're not really about fights. They're about personalities and Jerry's interaction with Muhammad and Muhammad's interaction with Jerry's daughter and son. Uh, I try to I'm trying to paint the picture of Jerry as a lively character, um, a crusader in some ways for against racism, against bigotry, against religious intolerance as well. Um, so there's a lot of ground covered. He talks about athletes that are courageous and inspirational, such as Jim Eisenreich, who battled Tourette syndrome. There's a big section in one of the chapters about him. Uh,
that's
I wanted
fabulous.
the book to give people kind of a snapshot of who Jerry is, what his
Hmm.
career represents, why he is important, um, why there are so many people that hold him in high respect and value
Yeah.
his work, his knowledge, his passion for sports and storytelling,
Yeah.
and caring about people, using the column to raise awareness about things.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a big part of what he's done over the years,
Yeah.
celebrating when people overcome things,
Yeah.
obstacles.
Yeah. So it sounds like, and let me know if this is right, you want the book to accomplish something specifically for Jerry in the sense of recognition for him, but there's also a bigger picture here. You want to talk about how sports and sports journalism has shifted our culture, has helped combat racism and be more welcoming to all religions and all peoples. It sounds like there's a bigger picture here.
Well, I do highlight the bigotry of Major League Baseball with people
Mhm.
being very opposed to the integration of baseball for blacks
Yeah.
and even for black journalists who weren't allowed in the press box. Jerry talks about journalists sitting on the roof of a stadium when they couldn't get into a game. Uh, these are things that Wendell Smith and Sam Lacey endured, and Jerry talks about that in the book. But I want the book to be sort of an educational primer for aspiring journalists in this era, and
Mhm.
maybe sports historians. This can be helpful to them as well to see the whole arc of his career.
Yeah.
I should mention that he started working for the Star Ledger in 1951 when he was in college, and his most recent byline was in February during the Super Bowl for
Nice.
the Star Ledger,
Nice.
and he is still writing books. So that inspires me as well to be motivated to work and to publish things that are meaningful.
Yeah. Let's and there you have it, right? Wanting to publish things that are meaningful, right? Not just talking about an influential figure, but publishing things that are meaningful, that person has done in their lives, or the way they've helped shape the world, or whatnot.
Mhm.
We have a question from Maggie Bryant. She's asking, was there ever a time you were nervous when interviewing athletes and coaches, or if you didn't know very much about a particular sport, you had to cover a sport you didn't know as well. Were you ever
Mm.
nervous, or maybe interviewing Jerry or interviewing,
Okay.
people for him? Were you nervous? What did you do with these nerves?
Let me give 2 examples, and that's a good question, Maggie. When I was the sports editor and assistant sports editor at the time and football beat reporter in Flagstaff working for the Arizona Daily Sun, um, one of the quarterbacks was arrested for a DUI,
Oh.
and didn't like him, and the coach didn't like to see the fact that we reported that in the paper. The fact that he was suspended. They thought, they were sort of saying bad publicity for the newspaper, for the city. The less people would go to the games, lower attendance figures. You should focus on the positivity of the athletes doing, like working in the soup kitchen, that kind of stuff. So I think the first interview after the player was back with the team after like a 1 or 2 game suspension, he sort of gave me the cold shoulder, like, I don't want to talk to you. So like, I'm thinking like, what is the first question I should ask this player? Should I ask him about how practice went, or should I say like, how do you feel being back after, being in jail for a couple of days, that kind of thing, that was I was a little nervous because I was only a couple of years older than the players at that time. So I wasn't really a real seasoned veteran, maybe, like late 20s at the time. And when I went to Beijing, the Beijing Olympics, first full day of action at the games after the opening ceremony night was I'm covering judo for the first time in person. And, like describing the techniques and describing the scoring is a bit tricky, doing it for the first time on deadline, and trying to do it in a sensible way that reads smoothly and that is interesting to the reader. I thought it was a bit of a challenge, but I did my best. And I read a few books about judo beforehand and got some tips from one of the Japanese journalists I know very well. But I was still a bit nervous with judo.
Yeah. Well, that makes perfect sense. I'd be nervous reporting on boxing because I know very little about it. But put me in a gymnastics competition, I can explain everything to you, right? We all have the things that we love, right?
I love gymnastics. It's fun to write about too.
So glad to hear that. That's brilliant. Okay, so let's talk about the process of writing this book. You interviewed Jerry for it. Did you do any other kinds of research? Did you interview other people? Tell us a little bit about what does it take to put together a book about an influential figure?
Okay. I think you want to read, watch, and listen to as many media outlets and, archived material that you can find about a person. Yeah. Print things out, save them on your desktop, buy things about that person, if they're an author, buy some of their books so you learn about their writing style. If they work in a newspaper or a magazine, collect things about them and things that are written about them or, said about them. Make exhaustive notes, which I find helpful for, like when I researched Bill Bradley before interviewing him, I read probably close to 50 magazine articles about Bill Bradley.
Yeah.
Over the years. There weren't that many about Jerry, but he's been writing since the early 50s. There's a lot of stories that he's written, and that was certainly helpful, collecting material online from him. In this internet age, it's easier to get stuff about the historical archives in some respects.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, initially I interviewed Jerry for 3 hours the first time.
Yeah.
And we did subsequent shorter phone calls over about a 5-year period. And also sometimes I followed up with emails with him.
Yeah.
Some shorter questions.
Yeah.
So multiple ways of communicating with people make sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you interview other people about Jerry?
I did. Probably close to about 20 people on the telephone and about 30 or 40 who actually responded to email inquiries as well. And about 45 to 50 people, I'm forgetting the exact number, appear in part 2 of the book. Some of them are sort of like soundbite type quick lines or a quick anecdote, but there are also several chapters. I think 12 or 13 chapters, I remember exactly the total, that are like separate newspaper articles about Jerry with each of the sources.
Yeah. Tell me about A memorable interview that you did.
Okay. Well, I have to pinpoint the first interview with Jerry because we spoke for 3 hours, and he was really in his element as a storyteller. Uh, he he's really good at the very little details that enrich a story, or the quote that he remembers from somebody from 50 years ago or 70 years ago, 80 years ago. He fills in the blanks so richly, and so to have that recorded and to go back and listen to it again and again was really fun.
Yeah.
But from the backdrop of that interview, I would say the Muhammad Ali interviews, about Jerry's interviews about Muhammad Ali, just because of the character that Muhammad is or was so fascinating. Hearing someone that knew him from the Rome Olympics until the time of his death, they
Yeah.
were acquainted with each other and became really good friends. So that was really rewarding. And as
Yeah.
far as other people who I interviewed, there were 2 Pulitzer Prize winners from the New York Times, sports writers, Dave Anderson, who is a real contemporary of Jerry's, who flew with him to the Rumble in the Jungle in Zaire for the
Mhm.
boxing fight, Ali and Foreman, back in '74. So Dave's recollections of Jerry about covering boxing and baseball and NFL were very helpful, and just about their camaraderie and how he really kind of handled himself in press scrums and just
Yeah.
dealt with people in the press room and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah.
Dave passed away in 2018, so it
Mhm.
was nice to be able to interview him a couple of years before he passed away, because it was helpful to have somebody from that same era. And a couple other people like that I interviewed. Jerry Green was,
Mhm.
along with Jerry Eisenberg, Jerry Green were the 2 guys who covered the first 55 Super Bowls in person. The newspaper, I should say 53 Super Bowls, but they
Wow.
were the last 2 who had gone to every one as a columnist.
Wow.
And I spoke to Jerry Green on the phone a couple of years ago as well, to also work on a chapter for the book. And Jerry Green passed away just a couple of weeks ago at age 94. So
Yeah.
trying to document some of the history of people who are older than Jerry or were part of that era, I thought was important.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
And I
and
have go
let me
ahead.
mention, like Wally Matthews is early 60s now, late 50s, early 60s, and he was 30 years younger than Jerry, but they developed a really strong bond and friendship, and like father mentor type of thing as well. And to hear someone who really had admired Jerry, who is from a different generation, was also helpful.
Yeah.
And hearing about the sarcasm and some of the jokes that Jerry played on him were pretty funny too.
Yeah. And I think you give us really good advice, suggesting you talk to people who came before, talk to people who came after, and their
Mhm.
perceptions of the person, their relationship with the person. I think
Mhm.
that is really, really good advice. I'm just going to, this is maybe a little bit of a follow up on Maggie's question about being nervous. How do
Mhm.
you get all these people on the phone? Give us a sense of, because not everyone you reach out to will say yes, obviously,
Right.
right? And one, you said something about, it took you a year to get Jerry on the phone the first time. So how do you get these people to agree? What does that process look like?
I guess I'm trying to sell myself as a successful journalist. I'm trying to say, like, for example, I've been working in the industry for like 20, 25 years. I covered the Olympics in Beijing and London. A couple of years ago, I worked on a big story about Bill Bradley and Carl Lewis, the Olympian. So I shared links in the email as well. I shared the published stories, these are a couple examples of my work. I shared a story like about Kobe Bryant's father with a couple people. And I interviewed Kobe. I didn't interview Kobe myself, but I interviewed Joe Bryant talking about Kobe when Joe was coaching in Japan as a basketball coach. So I think that helps to get people a sense you're not just some clickbait kind of, that's not your motivation to get clickbait, but you might want to write something that is relevant to people and has value. So
Yeah.
I think you want to be polite to them in the email, but you're also flexible. Like, I'm happy to speak to you for 10 minutes or, 35 minutes, 50 minutes. Whatever might work for you.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes sense.
And I'll be honest, a few of the interviews took place in the middle of the night because I'm in Japan. So I rearranged my sleep a couple times as well, but in the long run, it was worth it.
Yeah. Yes. And you're very good at that. We've learned, right? That's amazing that you're working on a completely different, schedule and time zone. And yet you're finding time to do all of these things that you want to do in this other time zone, right? Interviewing, great athletes and great journalists and pulling that all together. So you did primary research. You interviewed Jerry, you interviewed other people, you did some secondary research, you read newspapers, you read books, you went through, I'm assuming you went through records to find, documentation on, where he was, when he was in different places. How did you put it all together?
Well, I guess I spent more time on it than I thought I would, but basically from 2015, when the initial 3-hour interview started, until 2020 on his 90th, the ebook came out on his 90th birthday in 2020, in September 2020. And the print version came out a few months later through Draft 2 Digital. But I think during the pandemic, I was switching jobs actually from Japan Times to Japan Forward. And I had a bit more time on my hands and I was working remotely from home. And I really decided to rewrite each of the chapters and do more heavy editing and sort of streamline the process and get the book done. I said, if I'm ever going to get the book done, the most relevant time to do it would be the hook of his 90th birthday. I think that's what needs to be the hook now. Yeah. So the research was really ongoing from 2015 to 2020 because I would sort of like start and stop, and then I would find a chapter that wasn't quite right, and I needed to add material, and someone else would suggest, look at this, look at that. And I wasn't very organized, so probably it took longer than it should have, but I learned how to be detail oriented. Like every little detail I tried to fill in the blanks. So that was fun.
Yeah.
But it was also challenging because I was working as a full-time editor and also close to being a full-time reporter as well at the newspaper. So didn't have a lot of free time.
Right. So it's definitely a passion project.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a passion project. Nice. So if you're interested in learning more about Ed, find him at Ed Odeven, reporting.com, EDODEVEN, reporting.com. Have we missed anything important? Is there anything else you'd like to add before we wrap up, Ed?
I guess I'd like to add that the feedback on the book has been very, very positive and warm, and people seem to like to learn about what drives people, what motivates people, what makes people tick, what are their internal influences, what do they value in life, what are they trying to share with people. I've had different people reach out to me and talk about those things and how Jerry inspires them, and other people that were students in the United States kind of say, boy, I hope I had kind of the career that Jerry's had, even, half of that career. Yeah. So those things make me happy.
Yeah. Perfect sense. Every author wants to hear, The book made a difference to me. I was excited about it. It changed me. Every author wants to hear that. So that is beautiful. Thank you. So talking about how this book has changed people's lives and how it's had a really good response, where do we find the book?
Okay. I think the easiest way to find the book would be through Amazon.com, which I link the book page on my Twitter account. It's listed right there at the top. Twitter at ed_O'Devon. And people can read a detailed description of the book there. I also have a sort of a mini author bio about myself in the background. And there are 20 plus reviews about the book as well. So people can read a different longer and shorter and medium length synopsis of what people think about the book.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. So follow.
But of course, it's also available through other websites like Barnes and Noble and Goodreads and Apple Books as well.
Perfect. So really, you can find it anywhere.
Yeah,
and if
Walmart. Walmart.com has it.
Brilliant. So it is. You can find it anywhere, and if you want to make it easy, you can find Ed on Twitter at ed_O'Devon. If you want to find it easy, or in our description, we have the link to Amazon. So whatever makes sense to you, go find the book. Ed, thank you so much for joining us today. I've really enjoyed talking to you about sports journalism in general and how it really changes our culture and our world, and specifically about your book as well. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Melody Ann. I really enjoyed this.
Brilliant. All right, everyone, you want to come back next week because we are going to be talking about, sit up and listen, your posture. So writers do a lot of at desk slouching. We have somebody coming in to talk about posture and how posture can actually help you with your performance. I look forward to seeing you then.